When you picture the absolute wealth and divine authority of ancient Egypt, you picture this. But the ruler buried beneath that 24-pound shell of solid gold was an ailing 9-year-old boy. He never commanded armies. He never drafted legislation. Every single political and military decision credited to his reign was actually orchestrated by the adults standing behind his throne. This leaves us with a historical contradiction. The most famous Egyptian king in the modern world was, by every historical metric, the weakest one to ever wear the crown. To understand why a child was given that crown, we must look at the man who ruled before him. This statue is Pharaoh Akhenaten. Akhenaten intentionally dismantled centuries of Egyptian tradition. He outlawed the country's entire pantheon of gods and mandated the worship of a single sun deity. Stripping the old gods meant stripping the traditional priesthood of their wealth and influence. The sudden shift fractured the empire's stability, inciting violence and leading to the systematic destruction of massive stone monuments. When Akhenaten died, the surviving generals and priests saw an opportunity to claw back their authority. They placed a highly malleable 9-year-old on the throne, using him as a convenient public face to quietly reverse the religious mandates and reopen the old temples. The boy king was essentially an aggressive public relations campaign, deployed by his handlers to clean up the previous administration's mess. We can clearly see the physical toll of this life by looking directly at his remains. This structural diagram highlights what modern scans reveal about his physical condition: a severe curvature of the spine, poor bone density, and a compromised immune system. But examining the lower skeleton shows massive trauma. There is a severe, localized fracture at the left femur. He died in his late teens, shortly after this injury occurred. It is highly probable the wound simply became infected. But because his advisors had so much to gain from a transition of power, historians continue to debate whether this was a tragic accident or a calculated assassination. Regardless of the exact cause, his death was abrupt. Hurried into a small, repurposed tomb, was quickly buried and crossed off official records by the very men who had controlled him. Over 3,000 years later, the Valley of the Kings became a chaotic grid of excavation sites. European archaeologists rushed in to dig up whatever the ancient looters had left behind. In 1922, a British archaeologist named Howard Carter was spending his final season of funding digging beneath the rubble of a later construction project. There, beneath the debris, he uncovered a set of stone steps leading to a sealed door. Finding a royal tomb usually meant finding an empty room. Grave robbers had systematically cleared out the valley centuries prior. But because this specific ruler had been intentionally forgotten by his successors, later architects built their monuments right over his burial site. His sheer insignificance is exactly what kept his treasures perfectly hidden. When Carter's financial backer died from an infected mosquito bite shortly after opening the tomb, newspapers seized the opportunity to invent a global media sensation. The legend of the Pharaoh's curse was born. It was the combination of a perfectly preserved ancient hoard and a modern tabloid frenzy that turned a forgotten puppet into a worldwide celebrity. He spent his short life manipulated by ambitious adults, stripped of the divine authority that Egyptian kings were supposed to wield. Yet the thousands of artifacts packed into his tiny burial chamber provide the single clearest look we have into the daily lives, art, and religion of the ancient empire. He never had the agency to leave a deliberate mark on the world while he was breathing. But because he was buried and forgotten, the modern world has spent a century analyzing his every possession. Through a total lack of power and the sheer luck of a hidden grave, Egypt's weakest ruler secured the one prize every pharaoh sought. He achieved true immortality.